Hello, everyone. Good morning, afternoon, wherever you're tuning in from. I'm going to let some people come in, and we're really excited today to talk about lighting, all of the techniques and gear and equipment. We are joined by Bridget from B&H Creators, who's going to walk through all of the tech and the strategies. So, Bridget, thank you so much for being here today. Excited to have you.
Yeah, me too. Happy to be here.
And maybe while we're just waiting for people to come in, if you could speak a little bit on B&H Creators, as it's connected to B&H Photo, which people
Mhm.
might be more familiar with, kind of, how they work hand in hand.
Yes, absolutely. So if you guys haven't heard of B&H Photo before, it's a store. We're located in New York City. We've been around for a little over 50 years. And some people call it like the Willy Wonka shop for content creators. I think of it as like a Toys R Us. But essentially, we have all the gear and all the toys and tech that you could ever want or need to make really great content. We've been here as like the professional source for people in media, whether that's photography, video, film, TV, radio. And now we're here for content creators. And what the B&H Creators team does specifically is that we make sure that you guys who are creating the new media, right, who are creating for short form content, long form content, podcasts, what have you, that you know that we're here. One, not just to be your source for any type of gear or tools that you might need, but also we're here as a partner. So we do things like what my job is to make sure that we're providing really valuable educational resources like these webinars or workshops. So that way you guys aren't just kind of testing out gear and seeing what works, but you know what tools you need in order to make those visions, those ideas that you have for really fun, creative, engaging content come to life.
Amazing. Thank you. And now would love to hear a little bit more about yourself and your work at B&H Creators.
Yeah. I've been in media arts, I guess, yeah, a little over 11 years. And if you count college and high school, even more. But I've been involved. I've been a customer of B&H since high school when we were taking darkroom photography classes and we would do bulk orders of film from B&H, and I had to keep using them through college. And even as I was working in freelancing and with other media companies, B&H was always a go-to for us, right? And so what I used to do is I'd work with a lot of small business bureaus, some in Brooklyn, some in other locations, but I would help a lot with some of their small business campaigns. I'd just help with their content for their websites, doing headshots, etc. And all of it kind of ended up coming back to branding and making sure that no matter what we were doing, visually, we were also kind of carrying on that brand and that business style, right? And I think that goes back to content creation and why I was so excited to kind of come to B&H and work with them for this is that again it's about helping your authentic voice kind of come through in the best way possible. I think sometimes we kind of hear that we don't need to upgrade our gear or like worry about the production so much as long as we're being honest and consistent. And I think that's true to some extent. But if you want to make sure that you're getting across what you want to communicate and without distraction, knowing how to use the tools properly and knowing what tools to use is really important. And which is why I'm really excited that we're going to talk about lighting today.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's a great call out. I think that there's a range of, top tier cameras and kind of the production, but also the accessories of lighting and audio that can really enhance content creation. And there's a wide range of options depending on budgets and needs. So
Mhm.
excited to kind of go through all of those. And yeah, I think that B&H has an extensive list that, we're not even going to cover today, but excited to speak on kind of the lighting and some of those strategies. So if you guys are new here, I'm Aniston. I'm from the Metricool team, so more focused on PR and education. I've been with Metricool for a little over 2 years. So from SEO copywriting to PR and education, and really just empowering creators, social media managers, and marketers to simplify and optimize social media management. So really providing and educating on our platform, all of the capabilities of it, and really how to take back the power in social media management and bring back peace in it because we know that content creation is only one part of the game, and then managing socials can be a headache. So really trying to educate what our tool can do and how it can help today's marketers and creators.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. And I think what I'm excited to do when we dive into this lighting, I think lighting is something that's really easy to bring in. And even if you're just making one or two little changes, you can see like a really drastic kind of shift in the quality of your
Mhm.
content. And I'm not talking about all the work that you guys put in for, stories that you write, the scripts, etc. I'm just talking about how your footage will kind of look. I think we've all seen the videos that are a little muddy or blurry. Maybe like the edges around yourself as a subject, they just aren't quite as sharp. And if you're working with a phone or a camera on auto, bringing in more light and knowing how to use the light that's available to you is really going to help just kind of boost up that footage. So the way like I'm going to go through that today and what I'm going to talk about, I'm going to talk about the qualities of light. I'm going to talk about how we find a balance and when to use it, when to have more of a dramatic lighting versus a softer light. We're going to talk a little bit about color temperature, as well as how to use it to elicit emotions, because I think that's another thing that light is really good for, and using your light intentionally, especially with color. It's going to help kind of drive narratives and help build your world. I don't know if anyone, is on book talk, but if you can build a little bit more of those fantasy worlds of those books you're reading, like maybe that'll help your content, or it'll just make it a slightly different and help your visual brand stand out. I'll go through a few common setups, and then I know, Aniston, you have some more information at the end, but we'll get to the Q&A after that. So if you guys do have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll keep those questions in mind when we get to the end, okay? All right, so I'm going to keep going through. And I mentioned this a little bit before, but why lighting matters. We always want to see ourselves in the best light. And I know that's like a silly cliche, but it can be true on a technical level as well as on the analogy kind of side. So what I talked about before, that muddy kind of footage, it's not sharp, it's a little grainy. It usually happens when we're taking video at night or in low light situations, right? Like you kind of see it. You can have footage on your phone if you're outside in really bright sunlight compared to maybe what you take indoors at night, maybe one or two lights on. You'll see it just kind of has that fuzzy, almost old home video feel. When we're using light that's a little bit more powerful, or even just more of the light there, or again, using the light that we have to our advantage, making sure we're in the right position, we're at the right angle, etc., we can see a drastic difference. And this is all about how you want to present yourself and how you want to use light for your visual brand. So the qualities that I'm going to talk about for lighting, hard versus soft light, I'm going to talk about the direction, I'm going to talk about the size and shape of your light, and I'm going to talk about intensity. So these aren't the only ones, but these are the ones that I think are the main things. And also, you're going to see you don't necessarily have to use any fancy lighting gear for this. This is all just going to talk about how light is behaving, whether that's light in the room that you walk into or light that you bring in yourself. So the first one that I'm going to talk about, soft versus hard light. If you guys have heard that one is better than the other, throw it in the chat. If you guys haven't heard what hard or soft light is, don't worry. I'm going to tell you now. Typically, soft light is said to be more flattering, and hard light is said to be a little bit harsher. I think sometimes that we would simplify this relationship into soft light is better and hard light is worse, but that's not the case. There's just a time and place and when you want softer light and when you want harder light. So if we're reading this slide from left to right on the left side, that first person, that's hard light. I can tell that that's hard light because of where the shadows change. That is a very clear outline. It's almost like someone took a pencil and drew an outline of the shadow. I know where the shadow, aka the darkest part of your footage, stops and the highlight, aka the brightest point, start and begin. Whereas over on the right-hand side, the very last picture on this scale, that is super soft light. I couldn't tell you where the shadows start and stop because it's a very gradual gradient. It's a very gradual spread. So soft light, you'll usually see it in like beauty environments. It's really great at kind of smoothing out surfaces and minimizing details. So that's really nice if you want to make sure your skin looks super soft and you minimize your pores. Or if there's other things that maybe you want to kind of minimize the texture or have lower contrast. Whereas harder light, think of like action movies, Marvel movies, maybe something that's historical where you kind of want to see the grit and the dirt. Harder light is going to kind of emphasize that. So if you look at concrete, if you shoot that with hard light, it's going to look more gritty. Again, if you're looking at skin, if you have harder light, sometimes you're going to notice pores more than others. Again, one is not bad, one is not good, but there's just different times to use it. We really like it, and we see it a lot in action movies because, again, it is kind of calling back to the harsh environment that they're in, right? If it's just after a big fight, there's a lot of dirt, we really want to see all that detail. Mm-hmm. So when you have like hard light versus soft light, you might also see a difference in the direction. If we place our light directly above us, we might see that we get some shadows under our eyes. If we place the light to our side, that might be okay, but one side might be left in shadow. As this picture of the portrait shows, the light is coming from the top down, and it's kind of making her face truncated a bit or a little bit shorter because all the shadows are shorter. Whereas if we had more dynamic light coming from the side and the shadows were longer, her face might take a different shape. Lighting in this sense, changing the direction, is almost like contouring. So it also can kind of, when we change the direction of the light, if the light is visible in your shot, it might change your attention or your viewer's attention. And as an example there, do we have the light pointing at the picture? Is that a point of focus, or do we have the light pointing at the floor? And that to me says someone's about to step into that spot. So we're supposed to look there and pay attention to the character versus the artwork. So it's very subtle, but like it makes a big difference. Now in your content, how that would change, mostly we're going to think about how the light is lighting us as our subject, but maybe we're also including product shots for some brand deals, right? And also if we are going to pay attention to the environment around us, where's the light falling? What is the direction there? Now, when we have a light and we are able to kind of modify it and change it, we might put different modifiers on it, like softboxes. Softboxes can have different shapes and sizes. And what a softbox is going to do, it's helping to diffuse the light. And when we start with a bigger surface area, so again, reading on the slide, left to right on the right-hand side, that softbox is a lot bigger. When we start with a bigger surface area, our light automatically starts off softer. Versus a smaller light source, it's a little bit harder. If you want like a spotlight, like a really sharp light, again, you kind of want something that's funneling it or making it into a spotlight. And again, if you want really big, soft light, you need a bigger surface area. If you are using like a circular softbox, great, you'll have like a really even spread. Same with a square. And then some other different shapes, they do the same thing, but they might help you tweak your light or just kind of hone in the details about it. You guys, if any of you use soft boxes already, like let me know like what your favorite is. Is it a small one, big one, etc.? I like using different shapes depending on what I'm filming. For example, like a really oblong or like a long rectangle softbox. I like that if I'm going to do full bodies. or if I need to make sure that I'm getting like top of the ceiling down to the floor covered a little bit, because again, it's changing the surface area and it's kind of changing the starting coverage of my light source. It's also really cool if you do want to start getting really creative with how you're filming your different subjects and adding in those highlights. If you look at that bottle that I have on the screen and you notice the highlights going along the side, you can actually change what those highlights look like depending on the shape of your light. So using one of those longer soft boxes gives us the highlights that run from the top of the cap all the way to the bottom or the base of the bottle. Whereas if we used a circular softbox, you would just see like one little dot on the side of your bottle. So it's kind of cool if you really want to get into the details, like just changing the shape of your modifier can change the shape of your highlights as well, or catch lights. The distance of your light to your subject is also going to affect how hard or soft it is. But typically, it's also going to affect the intensity, which I'll talk about a bit more on the next slide. But just think of it this way. If we're starting with one light bulb, the further away you are from your light source, the wider the rays of light are going to be able to travel from where it's getting emitted to where it's actually like hitting you and getting recorded. So it becomes less intense the further away you step from this. I think we all know this subconsciously, but I always like to make sure I say it because sometimes we don't connect the dots without getting it said explicitly. What else is also going to change is the fall off or spread. And we talked about this when we looked at the soft light, remember? On that example, it's a very gradual change. So the further away from the light you get, you'll see that the fall off or the spread also gets more gradual, even though the intensity or the amount of light hitting the subject is going down. And again, for intensity, sometimes we can control the power outage or the power output of our light. If you're getting like video lights, we'll have some examples coming up for you to look at. You can control how much light is giving out. You can put it at 100%, 50%, 1%, etc. And some lights are going to start with a different max output than others. So then it becomes, okay, where does intensity come into place? It comes into place with your exposure. If your phone or your camera is doing all that work for you, great. If you add more light, it can actually help your camera to change its settings so that way the footage gets recorded clearer, right? We talked about that muddy footage or that kind of weird grainy looking stuff. If we have more light, the camera can do a little bit more work on the inside, changing the settings, ISO, shutter speed, aperture, all automatically to kind of make sure that the resolution and the clarity is really clear. So sometimes just adding a light will kind of help change that resolution or quality of your footage. But what also we need to pay attention to when it comes to intensity is how we're balancing the exposure or overall how we're lighting the scene. And you might do that. You might want to get all your lights at the same power and have a really kind of flat looking exposure, right? And that might be something we would call high key lighting. Key light is typically a name for the main light source. If you look at that really top example, there's still a lot of good contrast, but overall, we get the feeling in that type of footage that it's a bright scene. We know that it's supposed to be outside, etc. It feels overall slightly brighter, higher exposed. Whereas like low key lighting, which we have with the Joker over there, it's overall darker, even though the important details like his face, his makeup, they're exposed and we can see them. Overall, the scene still feels darker. Now, again, like, why does this matter? It's about your mood. It's about your visual style, your visual brand, how you want to present yourself and your content online. Kind of coming up with lighting setups that you use all the time and how you're balancing it. Do you have like a lower ratio where something's really more dramatic or cinematic or looking like a chiaroscuro kind of type of scale? Do you want it to look a little bit more, I don't know, environmental, like you're mimicking the restaurant, etc.? Or do you have some special effects in mind, like silhouetting or whatever? So when we're balancing that, that kind of goes back to intensity. Okay, if I want a low key light, I have one bright light, and maybe I do have a second light, but it's a lot lower power. So I still have some shadows, but it's only a tiny bit of detail. Whereas high key, you're kind of having more light flood in. Hopefully that makes sense. But if you have questions about this or have questions about any of this stuff, reminder, put it in the chat and we'll get to it at the end. Another thing we have to worry about balancing is color temperature. And I'm going to start with color temperature before we get into colored light, just because it's slightly different. So put in the chat, have you ever walked into a room or taken footage and you felt like it's too yellow or too blue? If this is a problem and you kind of just go with it, great. But if you want to correct it and you want to try to get to a neutral looking white, what do you have to do? Color temperature is really easy to correct in post, or we can correct it as we're shooting. Now, typically our cameras are working with an automatic white balance unless you're changing it to something else. And what our cameras are doing, whether that's on our phone or a camera body, is it's kind of reading the room and it's trying to decide, okay, what should I set as like a neutral white? The human eye can adjust a lot quicker than a camera can. And on the measurement scale of color temperature, it's measured in Kelvin degrees. Sunlight, like bright midday sun, is kind of the middle ground of what is a neutral white. Some people might tell you it's 5,400 degrees. Some people tell you it's like 57, and it can be anywhere in between. I usually go for 5,600 or 5,600 Kelvin. What do all these numbers mean? They're kind of like, where are we on a scale of really cold to really warm light? Cool light being a little bit more blue, warm light being a little bit more yellow. And again, that kind of neutral white light in the middle. When our cameras try to set it automatically, it's almost like they're shifting that neutral white. So if they think the room has warmer light than it actually does, it's actually gonna, that scale, it would shift it all lower. So it might, if the room has a lot of warm light, your footage might look less yellow. And that's if it does its job correctly. But we can do it manually, where we can go in and change the color temperature. Even if you're editing on your phone, you might see that there's settings to change your warmth or your blue point or something. That's color temperature. That's how it's kind of changing it. It's actually pretty easy. And I think if every light source is the same color temperature, you really don't notice it, and your phones and your cameras are going to do the work for you. But if, let's say, you have a bright window light that might be closer to a neutral white already, and then you have an indoor light like a candle, those are two different color temperatures, and your phone is going to pick one and make it neutral, and the other one's going to have a really colorful tint. Now, that might be cool. That might be okay. But if you ever wanted to get rid of that or bring it down to a neutral, we have to remember that when we're editing the color or when we're trying to set up our color balance, that light works on the additive color scale versus subtractive. I don't mean to keep throwing out like vocab words, but if you are keeping a list, I'd love to hear what you've learned today. But the additive color scale, you're actually kind of adding all the light together to get white. And then as you subtract the different colors of light, you get black, which kind of makes sense if you think about more light is brighter, white, and less light is darker, black. But if you feel like your footage or your videos are kind of leaning more green, we're not just going to take away green in the editing software. We're actually adding like a little bit magenta. So you can do this all in post-processing, or you can actually change your lights. Like there are settings if you're using lights like a GVM LED panel or maybe a Nanlite Pavo tube, you can actually go in and change the tint of the light itself if you kind of need to balance the color on location. So just keep this in mind. I think it's also cool to keep the contrasting colors or the colors that are opposite each other on this wheel in mind for kind of creating footage that looks, well, one, contrasting with color, but it can also kind of help tell different stories. Like if you have battling entities in your footage, or you're trying to, mimic some sort of drama in your short form or long form content, kind of keeping in mind that like if you have orange and blue light in there, it's going to look more contrasting, and maybe you're kind of showing two different sides. That's one way to use color intentionally. Another way, keep in mind, like color does elicit emotion, and you don't necessarily have to manipulate. I'm not saying to manipulate your audience with this, but it does help kind of drive your story and build your worlds. So these are all kind of examples. They're stills from movies. And I just I use these because they're a little bit more relatable, and then no one's feelings get hurt that I don't use your content in my presentation. But I think these are great examples of how color is getting used to drive the story, drive your message, as well as influence how you're reacting to it. So for example, and you tell me if you feel something different, but in that middle slot, there's two guys about to start a duel, and the action might be very tense, but because that color is really blue, it's almost all blue except for the shadows. To me, it's actually a little calming. So it's like a calm before the storm or before the fight, which is I find that interesting. Whereas if it was red, like up in the top left corner, that scene would have a totally different feel. Red, even though it can mean a lot of different things, like it can mean passion, it can mean love, it can mean danger, it can mean fire. Those are all different things, but they're all really high energy, even though they're high energy in different ways. So if you want, think about how you can bring in color to some of your content, again, to kind of push forward your message or narrative. All right, so we're getting into just some examples of light setups. If you guys use any of these, I'd love to hear that. Throw it in the chat, let me know. One light setup, super easy. It's really great. Very common setup is a ring light, but I'm just gonna say, I think we're all able to graduate beyond the ring light. If anything else, just treat yourself. Just if you're on a ring light, I'm not saying it's anything bad, but just treat yourself, graduate, upgrade to something a little bit different. The only reason why I say move away from a ring light is that it is great. It's super convenient, low footprint, and often you can just plug it in and go. It can end up washing out your face or your subject because it's light coming in from every direction. Remember when we were talking about shadows? The shadows actually help shape your subject and act as a contour. If we kind of have all of the light coming in from every direction, it's flattening us out. It's also with one light, sometimes it doesn't have enough power to get to your background. So it ends up just being you in a really dark room, right? It's almost like you're in a box. And then we have to start questioning if anyone's letting you out or giving you water. So I think we can all just upgrade from a ring light, or if you are going to use one, throw a second light in your background at least. That does bring us to 2-light setup. I love at least a 2-light setup because I can have one light on one side that I would call my key light or my main light. That's at 100% maybe. And then a second light that's at 50 or 75. So it still looks like I'm totally lit, but you will notice that I do have some shadows. And again, it's helping to shape the face. So it's separating my chin from my neck, if that's important to you. It can also help separate you from the background maybe, or it can just, again, cover up if you have a cowlick on one side of your face, etc. Whatever. It does give you a little bit more form and dimension when you start bringing in multiple light sources. And then, of course, there's the very common 3-point or 3-light setup. And this is something that gets taught in film school. Is a really good place to start because you're going to have your main light in your scene, and then you'll have your fill light. So that way your shadows aren't totally gone, but they aren't totally black either. There's still some detail there, but we're still keeping the shape. And then you would add a 3rd light or more to separate the background. So that way we can see the wall. I'm using a colored light behind me to just give us a little bit more of a definition and interest in my scene, right? And Metricool saying they use the 3-light setup for their YouTube videos. Yes, it's helping to like create depth. And when we can create more of a realistic environment that translates on footage, it's more engaging to your audience and viewers. And of course, it's always great to keep your audience engaged and keep them watching your content. There's other things you can do with light, especially when it comes into live streaming or recording in an environment. One of my guilty pleasures is listening to the AITA stories that podcasters or YouTubers will read aloud. And that's like my drama. Those are my stories, my programs. There's one guy I follow. And when the first red flag of the story comes out, he's using like his Elgato Stream Deck. He hits a button and all of a sudden his like beautiful 3-point lighting goes all red. And then we know like this is where the drama is starting. So it's kind of fun. It's a fun little change to see on screen, but it's also a bit of a game because it's sometimes you hear something in the story and you're like, whoa, that's not a red flag. And then it comes back later or something is different. He gets triggered before you do. It's kind of fun. And again, it's just adding another level. And it's something else that I think is just really creative way to kind of make his content unique, right? And it helps his story and it helps his audience like stay engaged and enjoy the interaction. Mm-hmm. So I've talked a lot about lighting and I've kind of gone through some stuff. I know Aniston is going to talk a little bit more about this and why it's important, and we'll get to your questions after this.
Yes, amazing. Thank you, Bridget. I was just sitting back and taking that all in. That was really, really awesome info. And I think your last kind of call out of not only lighting for, high quality content, but telling your story, making it, niche to you. So high quality content is key for repurposing on social media. So I always like to recommend to create your long form content first. So whether that's a long form YouTube video or you have a podcast or a stream, because then you can adapt it to short form and batch schedule it across multiple platforms to adapt it to a short or a reel or whatnot, and then measure the results, rinse and repeat. This is another example of kind of how you can take one idea from a YouTube channel, a podcast, either or even a video on LinkedIn, and then repurpose it to multiple platforms. And going off of that storytelling piece of whatever kind of the story arc is, you can really chop it into different pieces to build kind of that intensity and that hype around it. To share it across multiple platforms and then bring it back to what the long form content was, and kind of how it looks in action of having a full content calendar. You can schedule it at optimal times. Once you create your long form content too and chop it into different pieces, you don't have to worry about manually posting it and kind of keeping up with that engagement. You can have focusing on your long form, chopping it up to short form, having it scheduled out, and then having a centralized platform to measure your results, see your audience feedback, and then continue repurposing it if needed. And then another kind of what it looks like in action of on-demand analytics. So a list of your top performing posts across all networks to understand what is resonating best with your audience. So kind of going back to, these different lighting pieces, maybe you test out different lighting narratives and bring back in these colors to see how that works with your audience, because maybe you bring in this red light or kind of these different lighting pieces and it can really spark more interest from your audience. So I know that was a lot of info, a lot of great insights for lighting. I would love to kind of talk about too, if we have, more of the content creators just focused on shooting with their phone. What's kind of one, piece of lighting advice they can take away, or even just kind of, okay, as you mentioned, maybe moving away from ring lights, what can they kind of bring in to elevate their content as they maybe add on more of these pieces?
Sure. Yeah, I think if I had to tell someone like focus on this first while you figure out your lighting and start to learn more is probably the direction about it, especially if you're going to use, your phone and other or a camera that's really accessible to you.
Mhm,
Um, Kind of figuring out the direction first can solve some of the problems. So overhead lighting is really common,
mhm,
especially indoors, right? Every room pretty much has a ceiling light. And maybe you're doing content on a specific location, like gym content, right? I don't really think gyms have very flattering light.
yeah.
Some gyms you can have windows, but it's not a lot of times like
Mhm,
where the machines are, you aren't going to have that. So, how are you making content in there and how are you using the overhead light? And again, that's going to depend on your brand. I've seen overhead light and we are standing directly underneath it. And so we are getting those shadows. We are kind of almost masking at our eyes. We look a little bit more ominous. But if you look at the people, they're really toned and their muscles are really pronounced.
mhm,
Their type of training is reflected in that type of lighting, right? They're saying like, I train you, I give content for people who want to get toned, who like want to come off as a bit of like, muscle head, a little bit more powerful. I don't want to say intimidating, but maybe you do. At least like don't mess with me, intimidating, not an antagonist, but that's kind of their content. Whereas someone who might be doing more holistic, maybe you lean more towards stretching or yoga or Pilates or something, where you want your people coming to you to feel a little bit more relaxed and mellow. And this is training for people who just kind of want to stay flexible, they want to stay fit, but they aren't looking to really tone up. That brand, like your brand as a content creator, your brand of fitness might be different, and you can still use the overhead light, but maybe you just stand like a foot or two back. You're not directly underneath it, and you see that the light actually spreads and covers the majority of your face. So you're still in the same lighting situation, you're still in the same environment, but simply by changing your position or in relation to the light, you're changing a lot of your subconscious cues and what the
mhm,
lighting is telling the audience. That makes
mhm,
sense. So I would think like direction first.
yeah,
And then if you are looking to make sure that you always have a piece of lighting, I really like little pavo tubes or like little tube lights or little LED panels that are made for either on camera or they're just small, like they're kind of
mhm.
the size of a tablet or something.
Right.
Yeah.
More portable,
Mhm.
yeah, more portable gear. That's a good call. I think that, bringing it back to, okay, think about your content themes. What kind
Mhm.
of emotions and themes are you trying to emit that can help you guide your lighting techniques as you kind of, yeah, maybe add on more of these elements of color and intensity, bringing it back to, yeah, your overall themes and what emotions you want to emit in your content. So thank you for that. Um, this will be also on our YouTube channel live. So if you want to like go through back through the slides and see and kind of study more of the techniques and the gear, this will stay on our YouTube channel so you can access it at any time. And if there's any questions too, feel free to leave them in the chat. If not, that's okay. I know that this QR goes to B&H Creators newsletter,
Mhm.
some other ways to stay in touch with B&H Creators and Bridget. Um, yeah. And then I'll give a little trial code as well. So if you're new to Metricool and want to try any premium plan, you can scan this QR code for 30 days for free. So highly recommend, testing out like our advanced plan. It kind of has all of the features in terms of unlimited scheduling and accessing reports, some of the more advanced features. So you can really get a taste of everything you can do with Metricool.
Mhm.
Um, and also in for those who have attended live, we have a special little cheat sheet for you with all of the creator must-haves in terms of lighting and audio and filming gear. So make sure to look for your email for that cheat sheet. And if you have any questions, let us know. If you are watching, you know, after the live session, feel free to still leave them in the
Mhm.
chat. We will answer them as they come in. But Bridget, thank you again for joining us. Really appreciate this. And also in the post email, if you have any other kind of content creation strategies or techniques that you're looking for, specifically kind of from, the filming and enhancing your filming, then please let us know and we can incorporate it in a future session.
Yeah, that would be great. Like we'd love to come back and, present for your Metricool audience. And if there are any things that people are really curious about, especially from the gear side, we'd love to talk about that.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you all for tuning in. And again, make sure to stay in touch with B&H. They are an amazing, amazing company and just always providing top tier equipment and gear. So make sure to check them out. Thank you all for joining, and we will see you next time.